Think about a time, maybe recently, when you got just disproportionately angry about something incredibly trivial.
Oh, like when someone breathes too loud.
Right. Or say a partner forgot to buy milk on the way home. Or a coworker left an unwashed mug in the sink, and you absolutely lose it.
Oh, yeah.
The frustration bubbles up, and suddenly it's, World War III over 2% dairy.
Right. It feels huge in the moment.
It does. But if you really pause and look inward, you weren't actually mad about the milk.
Not all.
You were feeling overwhelmed, or you were feeling unappreciated, or maybe just deeply exhausted.
Mm.
And the milk was just the match that lit the powder keg.
Yeah, because we constantly project a feeling outward that, well, doesn't actually match the reality of what's happening inward.
Exactly.
And trying to fix the resulting conflict by arguing about the groceries is entirely missing the point.
Which brings us to the focus of today's deep dive. We are looking at a foundational text in psychology. Specifically, Chapter 16 of a counseling textbook, detailing the pioneering work of Les Greenberg and Susan Johnson.
Right. They are the architects behind emotion-focused therapy, or EFT.
Yes, EFT. And our mission today isn't just to memorize psychology jargon. Our goal is to understand the actual mechanics of our feelings.
I love that, the mechanics.
Yeah, we are taking the perspective that trying to fix a personal struggle by ignoring your emotions or, trying to just logic your way out of it is like trying to fix a broken car engine by turning up the radio.
That is a great way to put it.
Today, we're popping the hood.
And looking under the hood requires a massive paradigm shift. I mean, for a long time, both in society and in early psychology, emotions were viewed as chaotic problems.
Like things to be suppressed.
Exactly. The prevailing thought was that feelings needed to be managed or regulated or just reasoned away entirely.
Right.
But EFT completely flips that script. It operates on the premise that emotions are not the obstacle to healing. They are the actual agents of change.
Wow, okay.
But to use them as agents of change, we first have to recognize that the emotions we show the world on the surface are very often not the emotions we are experiencing at our core.
Right. The text categorizes this. It breaks our emotional landscape into 3 distinct types, which are primary, secondary, and instrumental emotions.
Yes. Let's start with primary emotions.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yep.
The text defines them as fundamental, direct, initial reactions. But I want to know what that actually looks like in the body.
So primary emotions are rapid and unfiltered. If someone jumps out from behind a door and scares you, that flash of pure primal fear, that is a primary emotion.
Okay, the immediate bodily response.
Yes. Or if you experience a profound loss, that deep, heavy physical ache of sadness is primary. It's the bottom layer truth of how your nervous system is reacting to the environment in that exact millisecond.
But we don't walk around displaying that bottom layer truth to everyone we meet.
Oh, we rarely do, because showing that primary emotion makes us incredibly vulnerable. And that is where secondary emotions come in. Secondary emotions are your reactions to your primary emotions.
Wait, reactions to our own emotions?
Yes. They are the feelings your brain generates to cover up the primary ones.
Give me a practical, everyday example of how the brain substitutes one for the other.
Okay, think about a parent who momentarily loses track of their young child in a crowded grocery store.
Oh, terrifying.
Right, for those 3 agonizing minutes, the parent's primary emotion is pure, unadulterated terror.
Absolute panic.
Exactly. But the second they spot the child hiding in the cereal aisle, they run over and start yelling.
Yes.
They express intense, explosive anger.
They don't fall to their knees and say, I was so afraid. They scold the child for wandering off.
Right, because the initial fear was too overwhelming. It was too vulnerable to just sit with. So the brain rapidly substitutes it with anger.
Because anger feels safer.
Yes, anger feels powerful. It feels protective. The anger is a defensive response designed to shield the parent from the unbearable rawness of the terror.
So secondary emotions are basically emotional body armor. We put them on because the primary emotion feels too raw, too exposed.
That's exactly it. We wear this armor to protect ourselves. And then the text outlines a third category, which is instrumental emotions.
Right, instrumental.
These are emotions expressed specifically to influence or manipulate others.
Like crocodile tears.
Yes, exactly. A person might not actually feel sad at all, but they have learned that crying will elicit a comforting response or maybe get them out of trouble. It's an emotion used deliberately as a tool.
Okay, that makes sense. And the text also makes a crucial distinction here about how these emotions function over time. It categorizes them as either adaptive or maladaptive.
Yes, this is key.
Now, adaptive makes sense. It's flexible, helps you navigate whatever is happening right now. But the concept of a maladaptive emotion is a bit more complex.
It is. A maladaptive emotion is rigid. It's an old, familiar feeling that just won't budge no matter what your current circumstances are. The text describes these as recurring feelings of worthlessness, or a core sense of shame, or maybe a primal fear that you are inherently unlovable.
But how does an emotion get stuck on a loop like that?
Well, these are learned responses. A maladaptive fear might have successfully protected you in a past traumatic situation.
Okay.
Say, growing up in a volatile household where staying invisible kept you safe.
Right. So the fear served a purpose.
Exactly. But now, as an adult in a safe environment, that same intense fear plays on a loop whenever someone raises their voice slightly.
Oh, wow.
It's totally disconnected from your present reality, but your body is still reacting as if the past threat is right in front of you.
Which brings up a larger question. If we walk around wearing this emotional armor, operating on old loops of maladaptive feelings, why are we so terrified of being vulnerable in the first place?
Right.
Like, what drives the brain to build the armor before we even realize it's happening?
To answer that, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the bedrock of EFT, which is attachment theory.
Okay, let's go there.
The textbook dives into the foundational research of John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, and Harry Harlow. And the core takeaway from their work is that human beings have a fundamental biological drive to be in relationship with others.
We're wired for connection.
Completely wired for it. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, isolation meant death.
Right. And the text mentions that this biological wiring relies on two crucial concepts during our infancy, which are the safe haven and the secure base.
Yes, and those two concepts serve different but very complementary functions. A safe haven is where you retreat when you're hurt or scared.
Like a caregiver who provides comfort and soothing.
Exactly. And a secure base is the launching pad. It's the reliable foundation that allows an infant to bravely go out and explore the world, knowing they have a safe place to return to if things go wrong.
So, based on how our caregivers provide or, fail to provide that haven and base, we develop different working models of how relationships work.
Right.
The text breaks down four main attachment styles, starting with secure attachment.
So, secure attachment develops when caregivers are consistently responsive. The infant learns that their needs matter.
Makes sense.
Consequently, people with secure attachment generally develop a positive view of themselves and a positive view of others. They feel worthy of love and trust that others will be there for them.
Okay. Then there is the anxious attachment style. This one is characterized by a negative view of the self, but a positive view of others. Why would an infant's brain wire it that way?
Anxious attachment usually forms when a caregiver is inconsistent. Sometimes they're incredibly warm and responsive, and other times they're emotionally unavailable or intrusive.
So it's unpredictable.
Highly unpredictable. The infant's brain can't predict what will happen. Because the caregiver is sometimes great, the infant assumes the caregiver is fundamentally good. That's the positive view of others.
Okay.
But because the care is inconsistent, the infant internalizes the blame. They assume, I must not be doing enough to keep their attention, hence the negative view of self. And as adults, they are constantly seeking validation because they're terrified of abandonment.
Wait, if we look at the third style, which is avoidant attachment, the text says this involves a positive view of the self, but a negative view of others.
Yes.
If someone has a positive view of themselves, shouldn't confidence make them more outgoing and secure in a relationship? Why are they avoiding connection?
That is a really common misconception. In avoidant attachment, the positive view of self isn't healthy confidence. It's actually a rigid survival mechanism.
Okay, how so?
This style forms when caregivers are consistently unresponsive or dismissive of the infant's needs. The infant quickly learns that crying brings no comfort, so they shut down their attachment behaviors entirely.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is. They develop a negative view of others, believing no one will be there for me, and their positive view of self is actually extreme self-reliance. Like, I can only rely on myself.
Ah, so they push people away.
Right, they dismiss their own need for connection just to protect themselves from the inevitable disappointment.
And then the fourth is disorganized attachment, characterized by high anxiety and high avoidance.
Yes. This often stems from trauma or abuse. The infant is trapped in a biological paradox. The caregiver is the only source of safety, but the caregiver is also the source of terror.
Wow.
So they want to flee to the safe haven, but the safe haven is dangerous.
Let's apply these styles to something incredibly common in a modern relationship, like texting. Let's say you text your partner and they don't reply for 3 hours.
Okay, perfect example. If you have an anxious attachment style, your brain interprets that silence as a threat of abandonment. You might panic, double text, and just spiral into wondering what you did wrong.
And if you're avoidant,
If you have an avoidant attachment style, your brain interprets the silence as confirmation that people are unreliable.
right?
You might put your phone on airplane mode, mentally detach, and pretend you don't care anyway.
And I guess if you have a secure attachment style, you probably just assume they are busy in a meeting and go about your day.
Exactly.
But this raises a major concern. If these working models of attachment are poured into our foundation before we can even speak, are we permanently stuck with them? Like, is therapy just a process of a professional pointing out that our foundation is cracked and handing us a bill?
No, not at all. And if we look at the actual mechanics of EFT, the answer is a resounding no. EFT isn't about analyzing a doomed foundation. It utilizes the therapeutic relationship itself as a new corrective emotional experience.
Okay.
The therapist intentionally steps in to act as a temporary secure base and safe haven.
They become a surrogate caregiver for the client's emotional landscape.
Exactly. By providing that profound, consistent safety in the room, the therapist allows the client to finally take off the secondary armor.
The anger, the detachment.
Right. The client can safely explore those terrifying primary emotions, the raw fear, the deep sadness, without being abandoned or dismissed. And through experiencing that safety repeatedly, the brain can actually reshape its attachment style.
Okay, theory is great, but I want to know what this looks like in practice. How does a therapist actually reshape an attachment style in real time?
Well, the textbook provides a concrete case study to look at, the case of Clarita.
Right, Clarita. She is navigating a painful divorce from an emotionally abusive ex-husband named Mark,
Mm-hmm.
and she feels worthless, lonely, and deeply afraid to ever trust a man again. She's carrying immense shame.
Yes. And reading the transcript of her counseling session reveals a really stark contrast to traditional talk therapy.
How so?
Instead of analyzing Mark's behavior or offering logical advice on how to move on, the counselor uses specific EFT techniques called evocation and focusing.
Okay.
The goal is to move Clarita away from intellectualizing her story. The counselor directs Clarita's attention entirely down into her physical body.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The counselor acts almost like a somatic tour guide. Clarita starts crying, but instead of just handing her a tissue to comfort her, the counselor asks, where in your body do you start to feel the crying? Where does the ache begin?
And Clarita's physical descriptions become vivid once she stops analyzing the divorce and tunes into her nervous system. She describes a sinking feeling in her stomach.
Yeah.
She talks about a tightness in her throat right before the tears come. Later, she says she feels like there are literal weights pressing down on her chest.
Grounding the abstract pain of a divorce into a physical reality changes the dynamic entirely. It's not a sad story she's recounting anymore. It's a physical sensation happening right in front of the therapist.
Exactly. And through this physical focus, the counselor is able to isolate Clarita's maladaptive primary responses.
Her fear of men.
Right. Her trauma with her ex-husband created a rigid, maladaptive fear that all men are dangerous. That fear kept her vigilant and protected her when she was with Mark. But now, as a maladaptive loop, it's preventing her from forming any new healthy connections.
Right, it's stuck.
So the counselor has to help her safely feel the physical weight of that fear so it can be fully processed rather than just endlessly avoided or masked with secondary anger.
The textbook explains that finding the feeling in the body is just the starting point. EFT relies on a very specific choreography designed to move clients from that bodily awareness into lasting change.
Yes, the 5 tango moves.
Right. Sue Johnson's 5 tango moves of EFT,
Oh.
treating the process as a literal dance. But reading the list of moves in the text like mirroring, assembling affect, choreographing encounters, it sounds incredibly clinical.
It does sound clinical.
What does choreographing an engaged encounter actually mean for someone sitting on a couch?
Let's translate the clinical jargon into the actual mechanics of the room. Move 1 is mirroring present process. This simply means the therapist reflects exactly what is happening right now without judgment.
Okay.
If the client's voice drops and they look at the floor, the therapist says, "I noticed you just looked away and your voice got very quiet." It brings awareness to the present moment.
Okay. Move 2 is assembling and deepening the affect. By affect, we mean the raw underlying emotion.
Yes. The therapist helps the client take a vague feeling and give it a vivid shape. If Clarita says she feels bad, the therapist helps her assemble the effect until she can say, I feel a heavy, sinking terror in my stomach when I think about being abandoned.
Wow, that's specific.
And then move 3 is choreographing engaged encounters. In couples therapy, this means the therapist literally directs one partner to turn to the other and share that newly uncovered primary emotion. Like, can you turn to him and tell him about the sinking terror?
In individual therapy.
It might involve speaking to a part of oneself or someone from the past.
Then move 4 is processing the encounter, asking how it felt to finally say that out loud. And move 5 is integrating and validating, tying this new experience of vulnerability back to the bigger picture of their relationship or life.
Exactly. And to guide a client through these incredibly vulnerable moves, the counselor uses a communication style summarized by the acronym RISSAC. RISSE.
Right.
It stands for Repeat Images, Simple, Slow, Soft, and Client's Words.
It's about radically slowing down the pace of the conversation. You repeat the client's words softly, using their own imagery. You don't use clinical terms. You use their specific words, like Clarita's weights.
And there is a deep physiological reason for this. Speaking slowly and softly mimics the tone of a soothing caregiver. It signals biological safety to the client's nervous system.
And when the nervous system feels safe,
When the nervous system detects safety, it drops the defensive secondary emotional armor. The client doesn't feel the need to argue or defend themselves, allowing the primary emotions to finally surface.
so once that safety is established and the armor is down, the therapist can introduce more active interventions. The text highlights Les Greenberg's chair work, which is iconic in experiential therapies.
Very iconic.
It outlines 2 main types, starting with the 2-chair technique used for what the book calls conflict splits within the self.
Right. A conflict split is simply when you feel torn in 2 completely different directions. For instance, a harsh, critical inner voice constantly berating a vulnerable, experiencing self.
Yeah. Like, you should have known better versus, I was just doing my best.
Exactly. In 2-chair work, the therapist literally puts those 2 parts in separate chairs and has the client physically move between them, speaking from each perspective, bringing the internal conflict out into the physical room.
The second type is the empty chair technique, which is used specifically for unresolved pain or unfinished business. The textbook notes that the counselor uses the empty chair technique to help Clarita address her lingering trauma regarding her ex-husband, Mark.
Right.
The counselor sets up an empty chair, asks Clarita to imagine Mark sitting right there, and instructs her to speak directly to him.
Yes.
Now, I have to ask on behalf of everyone listening.
No.
Talking to an empty piece of furniture sounds highly theatrical.
Sure.
It sounds awkward. Does pretending your ex is sitting in a chair really do something that just looking at the therapist and saying, I'm incredibly angry at my ex-husband, doesn't?
It's a very common reaction to find it awkward initially, but the psychological mechanism behind it is profound. When you simply tell the therapist the story about your ex, you are remaining in your intellect. You are analyzing the past.
Right.
You are highly likely to employ secondary emotions, like a detached annoyance, a rehearsed complaint, or intellectualizing the abuse.
You're basically wearing the armor while giving a book report on the fire.
That is exactly it. An enactment, like talking directly to the empty chair, bypasses those intellectual defenses entirely. By forcing the brain to engage with the imagined source of the pain in the present tense, the secondary emotions fall away.
So you tap into the raw stuff.
The client taps directly into the raw primary emotions. You are no longer reporting on a past event. You are forcing a new, adaptive, emotional state to emerge right now.
Wow.
It allows Clarita to access primary adaptive anger, holding him accountable in real time, which physically shifts her core sense of self from a victim to someone with actual agency.
Given how intense this therapy is, focusing on physical tension, choreographing emotional encounters, yelling at empty chairs, we need to look at the hard data. Does the research actually support putting people through this?
Yes, the empirical support for EFT is substantial. Research consistently shows it is highly effective for treating depression, processing complex trauma, including childhood abuse, and resolving severe couples distress.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Furthermore, longitudinal studies indicate that because EFT fundamentally reshapes attachment patterns rather than just teaching coping skills, the positive effects hold up over time.
But the textbook also explicitly addresses a major limitation, which is researcher allegiance.
Right. In any scientific review, we have to look at who is conducting the studies. The text points out that a significant portion of the foundational research demonstrating EFT's efficacy was conducted by Les Greenberg, Susan Johnson and their direct colleagues or former students.
I mean, it makes logical sense that the people who develop the model are the ones studying it most intensely.
It does.
But as critical consumers of information, we have to acknowledge that developers naturally want their life's work to succeed.
Of course.
While it doesn't invalidate the massive body of research, it means independent replication from researchers, with no stake in EFT's success, remains the gold standard for solidifying its legacy.
Exactly. Though even taking researcher allegiance into account, the sheer volume of empirical support for EFT as an evidence-based practice is practically undeniable within the field of psychology today.
Well, we've covered the mechanics of secondary armor, the biological drive behind attachment styles, and the choreography of change. But the textbook leaves us with one final fascinating distinction from an EFT study regarding emotional injuries.
Yes, Greenberg and his colleagues studied how individuals process deep emotional pain and trauma. They noted that participants who successfully worked through their pain using EFT techniques were able to genuinely let go of their negative feelings. They found total internal resolution.
But the textbook explicitly notes a crucial distinction here. Letting go is not necessarily the same thing as forgiveness.
Right, and this challenges a massive cultural narrative. We are constantly told that to truly heal, to find real closure, we must forgive the people who have wronged us.
Right.
But the data here suggests otherwise. The physiological process of emotionally letting go, of resolving your own internal trauma and reshaping your attachment, is an entirely separate mechanism from the interpersonal act of forgiving a perpetrator.
You don't need the other person's apology, and you don't need to grant them moral absolution in order to free your own nervous system from the weight of the past.
Exactly. You can fully process the primary emotion, dismantle the maladaptive loop, and move forward with a secure foundation without ever extending forgiveness if it isn't warranted.
If psychology shows us that you can fully let go of your pain, heal your trauma, and move forward without ever having to forgive the person who hurt you, how does that change the way you view closure in your own life? Next time you feel that disproportionate frustration bubbling up over something small, remember, you don't have to just turn up the radio. You have the tools to look under the hood.